Welcome back into the Door Report. It is episode 46. It is a Tuesday, November 10th. Welcome back in the Door Report presented by Alaco Hardwood Flooring. Willie, we're back and better than ever with another episode. I'm down here in Naples. You're up in Nashville. I can't wait to get back up to Nashville for Thanksgiving. I'll be up there on the 20th. It was a decent weekend. I mean, Vanderbilt basketball has some good news. But Vanderbilt football, my goodness, they almost pulled it out in Starkville.
Yeah, we'll get into it a little bit after we talk about some of the good news surrounding basketball as we inch closer and closer to Stackhouse's second season. But yeah, that Mississippi State game was awfully reminiscent of that Texas A&M game where it felt like you were just 1, 2, 3 plays away from really pulling it off.
Yeah, and the way the course of the game went, it started out 14-0, and then Vanderbilt kind of claws back. So it was a 24-17 loss at Mississippi State. We'll get into that game and a lot more in terms of where this football team is at this point in this season. But before we get to some more breaking news, don't forget to follow us on Twitter. That's at Door_report and Instagram, Door.report. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our podcast is also available on Anchor, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Also, while you're at it, go give our podcast 5 stars and a review on iTunes. All right, Will, Issac McBride, the Kansas transfer, is eligible. How about that? He's back, and he's a guy that will provide depth in the backcourt. And for a team like Vanderbilt and coming into this season, that's big because they need all the depth they can get. So he's a Kansas guy. He started at Kansas. He was a pretty highly rated recruit. Obviously, he transferred from Kansas. But Will, I think this is big news, for this team. I'm not sure how much he's going to play, but definitely a positive set of news heading into this season.
Yeah, any amount of depth that Vanderbilt can add, and actually right now having 13 out of 13 scholarship players available to play is pretty phenomenal considering how shorthanded they've been in recent years with walk-ons starting, not just, in the rotation, but actually starting out on the court. So it's always good to add some depth. And if you're interested at all, we just posted an article on the Door Report by Braden McPherson.
Yep.
Go check it out. It's got a little highlight tape from a tournament or something along those lines that he was in, which is really good and get you an idea of kind of what his game is. And he breaks down his game pretty well in that article that we posted.
Yeah, and Stackhouse had a lot of good things to say about it. He said, in quote, "We're pleased that Issac was granted his waiver for immediate eligibility. He has waited patiently for the opportunity to compete in game competition. We're thankful for the support of our Vanderbilt administration and compliance team throughout the process." And Will, this is it's a very interesting process because the NCAA is obviously that they're very inconsistent with a lot of these kind of things. And obviously if the rules was that he would have had to sit out this season based on the NCAA rules. If he had not received a waiver, but he did receive the waiver. So, a lot of times it's up in the air whether or not these guys are going to actually get the waiver or not. But luckily for Vanderbilt, McBride has the waiver. And Will, you talked about his highlight tape in high school. He averaged nearly 30 points and 5 assists at Arkansas Baptist Prep. So he's obviously, pretty used to putting the ball in the basket. So he should be a fun guy to watch. And one more tidbit here, Kevin Flaherty, 24/7 Sports college basketball expert. He actually covered McBride at Kansas for a little while. He said he has a chance to be an impact player fairly early on as a point guard who can create his own shot. And it'll be interesting to see how he transitions as a catch and shoot threat, something he likely worked on in the offseason. So Will, obviously with Scottie Pippen Jr., not sure how much, time, how they'll kind of rotate that. But from your perspective and in terms of, kind of being a spectator of Vanderbilt basketball, how much playing time do you think he could see?
Yeah, the NCAA waiver thing, if they don't have to release any reason, if anybody could explain why Malik Langham was not approved for a waiver the previous year after not playing a snap for Florida, and then Issac McBride was approved to play basketball after not getting on the court for Kansas, the logic there's this complete disconnect. There's no consistency, no logic, and it really feels like the Blue Bloods, like Duke, Kentucky, they never have a single issue getting these waivers.
No. They got it
Thankfully,
easy.
the NCAA came through for good old Vanderbilt. So
Finally.
I can see him being pretty heavily in the rotation. Honestly, when you go back through and watch his game, reminds you a little bit of Pippen.
Mhm.
Good shooter, not incredible shooter, but really good shooter. Good in the pick and roll game, which is going to be good with Cleavon Brown there and Dylan Dessou.
Mhm.
So I can see him being pretty heavily involved in that rotation and kind of maybe that seventh, eighth man off the bench, maybe first or second guard off the bench.
Yeah, and you touched on the depth, Will, which I think is really important with this team because last season that's they just didn't have any depth at all, and because of the injuries of Neesmith and Brown. But this year, Brown is back. You get Quentin Walora Brown also in the rotation. Several incoming freshmen also. So depth will not be a problem. Experience, could be an issue. And I wouldn't say talent is an issue because they got some talented guys and guys that have been in the system. So I'm interested, Will. I'm really curious to see what's going to happen this year. And we'll talk a lot more about basketball as we get closer to that season. But they will kick off or tip off the season rather at the Legends Classic tournament. That's the Roman Legends Classic. It is officially set to begin on Tuesday, December 1st at Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. The field is set. Well, we got USC and BYU at 2:30 Eastern on December 1st, and then Vandy will face off with UConn at 5 Eastern. Both games will be on ESPN2 that day. If Vanderbilt wins, they'll have a big game Thursday night at 7 Eastern on ESPN. So this is a great opportunity for Stackhouse and his guys to showcase, where they are in the Stackhouse era. And the coaching staffs in this tournament are pretty impressive as well. Dan Hurley at UConn, Andy Enfield at USC, Mark Pope, BYU. So, Will, this is going to be a fun tournament to watch, I think.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that we see a matchup between Vanderbilt and BYU, so we can give Jackson Tolk, one of our
Oh,
writers, a hard time. He's an alumni from
he
there.
could
Or
be in trouble if he's cheering for BYU.
yeah, so we might have to kick him out of the group if they do end up getting matched up and let him back in after the game. But honestly, I'm just itching for the basketball season. There feels like a little bit more of a positive energy going into this second season for Stackhouse. You've got more of a set roster. You're still young. You have Cleavon Brown coming back with that medical red shirt. So I think we're all expecting a step forward. How big is that step going to be is going to be
Yeah.
the question that we're going to be asking throughout the year. Is it going to be, instead of winning, what did they win? A couple games in conference, 3 games in conference, maybe they can pull off 7, 8 wins, and maybe be in the discussion for an NIT berth. I don't expect to see them, escalate to the point of where they're on the bubble even for the NCAA tournament. But they do have a lot of young talent, and watching Dylan Dessou and Scottie Pippen continue to develop is something I'm really looking forward to.
You mentioned Pippen Jr. there. A quick note from everyone at the door portal: we wish him a happy birthday. So Scottie Pippen Jr. is now 20 years old, and man, we're both older than him, Will, but he's got a nice little life right now. So, but yeah, basketball they're getting set. No, December 1st is the Legends Classic at Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. We're getting ready for that season, and again, can't wait to see what Stack and the boys have for year 2. Well, let's move on now to football. Mississippi State and Vanderbilt. This was a game that we thought, wasn't going to go the way it went. And talking before the podcast, before we recorded it today, and it's kind of like, man, this reminds us of the A&M game a little bit, just kind of that roller coaster. Vanderbilt got down 14-0. They found a way to fight and claw all the way back. I know at halftime there's a lot of doubting, I think, on Twitter from a lot of Vandy fans, but they come back, they battle back, and I think that does say a lot about just the effort and I think commitment to Derek Mason's style, and kind of his mindset because of with how tough this season's been. You got to give him credit in this one. And Will, I was impressed. I'm going to say it. I was impressed with the way this team fought. They definitely could have pulled it out without a couple of the mistakes they made. But my goodness, what a fight from the Commodores on Saturday.
Yeah, the only thing that I could sit there the entire time watching the game was just flashing back to that A&M game where you watch the game, you watch the flow of the game, you look at the stats, and you sit there and say, we're outplaying this team. We're beating this team. You look at the scoreboard, you're down 2 scores, or you're down a score. And it was just, once again, missed opportunities and turnovers. penalties that just shouldn't happen, like jumping off sides on a fourth down play and giving Mississippi State first downs. I'm going to say something that is going to be shocking. I
Mm.
actually loved the game plan, regardless of outcome, by Derek Mason and Todd Fitch. It was a lot, and Ted Roof. Sorry, I didn't mean to leave him off. But Mason's defensive game plan wasn't great coming in. Mississippi State obviously jumped out to an early lead, but the adjustments that he made were obviously outstanding.
Yeah.
He completely shut down that air raid offense almost in the second half. A couple guys in particular on that defense that were outstanding, really jumped out to me, were Jalen Mahoney, Brendan Harris, and then somebody that didn't show up on the stat sheet very much, but was completely disruptive, and the stat sheet doesn't do him justice, just dominating that Mississippi State offensive line, was Dio Dangbo.
Oh yeah.
He was he was absolutely wreaking
That one
havoc.
sack he had, I mean, he was on the ground. I think this sack could have been more on Will Rogers, the quarterback, but he fell to the ground right in front of the quarterback, got up, and was able to make the sack.
Yeah,
I
I
was like,
found
that's
myself not even watching the ball on a lot of plays and watching Dio Dangbo drive back their offensive
just
lineman
dominate.
like he was a high school junior. So that
Yeah.
was extremely impressive. And watching that film is something NFL scouts are going to look at and be like, whoa, like
Mhm.
this is an outmatched defensive line, and he's still dominating through double teams and whatever it is. And Billy, the frustrating thing, we talked about it before the season, was you have a true freshman quarterback. There are
Mhm.
going to be high highs, there are going to be low lows, because for lack of saying anything, he doesn't know any better. He's going to make some of those freshman mistakes that you look at and say, "What the hell are you doing?" And he's also going to make some throws like that touchdown pass that he had this game, where you say, "Wow, like that's a
The
flash in
dot
the
to Chris
superstar right
Pierce.
there." So he had turnovers that honestly, without sugarcoating it, cost him the game, or cost us the game. This loss is on the shoulders of Ken Seals. Now, with a caveat on that, Todd Fitch asked him to do a lot more. I believe the first interception Seals threw on his first pass of the game was an incredible play by the defender,
Oh
a
yeah.
one-handed catch, but
Yeah.
Seals never saw him. And the real backbreaker was the interception in the red zone. That's something that's just kind of honestly unrecoverable
Mhm.
for Vanderbilt to have that opportunity. But so I don't want to put it on here and act like I'm hating on Ken Seals' performance or anything like that. He was asked to do a lot. He threw 46 passes, and he's a true freshman. So he's
Mhm.
seeing things he's never seen before. His stats, I believe he's 31 for 46 with a touchdown and 3 interceptions. So he really, and a big focus was getting Cam Johnson involved once again, who had
Oh yeah. He
an
did.
outstanding performance.
He really did. He was definitely, I mean, he was leading receiver, 10 catches, 114 yards. And I think the last two games is something like 26 catches, 230 yards, somewhere around there. So Johnson is really starting to find his groove that we were all kind of waiting for. And he's there right now. Keon Henry Brooks also had, it's kind of an interesting stat line. I mean, he played amazing. 20 carries, 115 yards, one touchdown, and then receiving 11 catches, 97 yards. So the performance from Henry Brooks, he in the second half, you could say he kind of put this team on his back and said, we're not going to go down without a fight. You talked about Seals though, Will, and I go back to kind of the quarterback personification. What is a quarterback? What is the quarterback's role in college football, NFL? It's the game is in their hands a lot most of the time. The game's in their hands, and you said it. I think this will be placed on Ken Seals. Coaching staff's not going to say, hey, Ken, this game's on you. That us as fans, we're judging the way we see it, and we say, okay, Ken Seals, if he makes a couple more throws and maybe doesn't throw 3 interceptions, they probably win this game, in the end. So the 2 interceptions were early, but again, for a quarterback, it's in a win, it's all on you. Ken Seals is our guy. We're praising him. In a loss, it's okay. This is on you. So a loss is on you, and a win is on you. That's kind of the way a quarterback goes. So for me, it's I hate putting the blame on him. You kind of have to, like you said, Will, because he's our guy. Like
Yep.
Ken Seals he's the guy. He's the future. He's going to be the quarterback for the next 3-4 years. But a great game nonetheless. I mean, he
Yeah,
made a great
I
throw.
look at Ken Seals, and why I don't want to do is I think we'll be doing this podcast in a couple years and talking about his development and how well he's playing. So I don't want to hate on because if people forget, Kyle Shermer didn't exactly come out of the gates and was lighting the world on fire. I
No.
mean, he didn't even have that job locked up really till until halfway through his junior season.
Mhm.
So Ken Seals has a lot of time to develop. And speaking of getting in a groove, you mentioned Keon Henry Brooks. I don't want to graze over that because his
Yeah.
performance was one of the best running back performances that we've seen, including performances from Keyshawn Vaughn and Ralph Webb and Zach Stacy. He was outstanding.
Yeah, that 30-yard run late was, I mean, that was a backbreaker. And that was like, okay, Vandy's here. Like the Vandy's here to stay in this game. And there it kind of reminded me, I really hate saying this, but kind of reminded me of kind of that never give up attitude from the James Franklin type of teams where I remember a South Carolina game in particular on the road, they ended up losing 35-25, but the way they fought, I mean, it's just kind of that mindset of like, okay, we're never down. We're never down and out, and we're going to come back and find a way, make the plays, make winning plays. And in this game, yes, they made some interceptions, and the defense, they allowed some big plays from Mississippi State, but they made plays that were winning plays, like the run from Keon Henry Brooks, a winning play, the Dio Dengbo sack, and some of the plays Ken Seals, some of the throws to Cam Johnson and Chris Pierce. So I think what you're starting to see, Will. I'm not getting too far ahead of myself. This team is 0-5, but I think you're starting to see a little bit of the identity of this team kind of start to form because this team this season is not really going to have an identity. I mean, let's face it, like they might not win another game because their chances are dwindling. These last 2 weeks were two very good chances. We'll see what happens in Lexington on Saturday, but Will, this team is starting to form their identity, and it's kind of they're going to have to figure out how do we win games? It maybe not necessarily this season. The mindset is how do we stay tight in these games, but well, the identity, I think, is starting to form, and the air raid could begin to slowly creep into Todd Fitch's mindset because that could be, the air raid. Let's face it. Vanderbilt is likely, not going to win games through the air raid offense this season. Maybe, probably not even next season. But I think they do need to start shifting their mindset more towards, okay, for our running game to be successful, or for our offense actually to be successful, do we act as if we're running the ball through a pass? Because that's what kind of Washington State through Mike Leach and even Mississippi State does. They throw the ball as if they're running it. So the short, quick passes acts as the running game. So if they get to that, that'll be kind of the air raid point. It's like, okay, this team's air raid, but I still don't think that's the way that's the way they can win
Yeah.
games.
The Vanderbilt offense has really lacked an identity through this entire season. Every
Mhm.
team has, are you a pass to set up the run team or are you a run to set up the pass team? And thus far, it hasn't really been either. I don't know if we're run first or pass first. It's been very up and down, very inconsistent. I don't think we still have an answer to that question. But the screen game has been implemented and improved upon week after week, which is something that we talked week in, week
Mhm.
out. And that is, we've really seen the offensive production increase because just setting up that screen game doesn't allow the defensive line to crash near as hard to the quarterback. It sets up, a good 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 yard gain on first or second down. And talking about the air raid, honestly, I was expecting Mike Leach's air raid because I've been a big fan of it in other
Mhm.
conferences. I was expecting it to come in and be successful. I understand, and I'm gonna have my hot take here. Okay,
Oh, here we
so
go.
here
Here
we
we
go.
go.
I don't think the air raid offense, with how it is now, is ever going to work in the SEC. Now, let me explain this
Oh.
because everybody's going to go through, and the announcers were even talking about it. And last week, when we had guest on from Mississippi
Mhm.
State, they were talking about having to get their guys in there. So,
Yeah.
playmakers on the outside and the offensive line that is built more for
It
pass protection,
takes a
wider splits.
while.
But watching that offense, it's a very simplistic offense. Like people think of the spread offense and the air raid offense being, two sides of the same coin, and they're really not. The air raid offense doesn't have tight ends. There is not a tight end on Mike Leach's roster. they really don't even they don't really run the ball. I mean, the
Yeah.
run plays are like pitches out to the outside or short jet sweeps.
Mhm.
And the issue that you run into in the SEC, and you saw it with, um,
They're just too fast.
well, that, and you saw it with, you don't have tight ends, so everything is on those five linemen. And you saw
Yeah.
with Vanderbilt creating pressure, the defensive lines of the SEC are too good,
Mhm.
to just have five guys line up, even when they're quick passes. And regardless of playmakers, I can't see it working where you can't line up under center and run the ball
Yeah.
ever. And I'm
And
not a fan of Vanderbilt doing that because I like the spread offense, but it's too simplistic. And the SEC is the closest thing that you have to an NFL mindset of defensive coordinators. Like, you've done this, now we've got film, now that's not going to work. And you saw that with Derek Mason's adjustments, and Vanderbilt's probably the 13th, 14th best defense in the conference. And in the second half, they came out, completely shut down that air raid.
I think the closest thing to an air raid we've seen in the SEC is probably Auburn, with who was the quarterback, Franklin, John Franklin
John
potentially.
Franklin
And
third.
and yeah, so like that was, it's not like that was a lethal offense, but they had a little bit of success, but like you said, they couldn't really sustain anything. They couldn't really sustain that for the entire season. And you saw a lot of times where they would just get shut down because the SEC speed and beef was too much, because a lot of the defensive lines nowadays in the SEC are just insanely athletic. And you see some of these guys, they're going sideline to sideline, and you're looking at it, that guy's a defensive end like that. And even some defensive tackles are doing that. So the way, I agree with you, Will. I don't think, I don't think Todd Fitch is sitting there saying, okay, yeah, now we got to move to the air raid, because the way Keon Henry Brooks ran, now Vanderbilt will probably is likely to see a little bit more success in the play action. Yes, they played Mississippi State, the next worst team in the SEC, but Kentucky probably a little bit more in that lower echelon of the SEC. And then when you start playing Tennessee, we talked about that team as being lower echelon. So there will be a couple more chances for us to really see what this offense is made of. But I do agree. Well, I think in the end they need to stick to what Todd Fitch is really preaching, and that's okay. It's hard to see right now. I still think it's run first, with Keon Henry Brooks, and especially since Javion Marlowe's out, it's been tough. But offensively, again, we talked about it all night, really impressed with kind of Todd. I was impressed with Todd Fitch. I think this is one of his best called games because of the way one of my favorite plays was, I'm pretty sure it was late in the game, Cam Johnson went in motion. And a lot of times, you send a guy in motion and the defense locks him down because he's the guy in motion and you're likely looking for him. But Cam Johnson went in motion, and he just kind of stayed running towards the sideline as a quick little out route. Seals hit him. He got out of bounds, got a first down. That's how you want to see Cam Johnson used. And Cam Johnson, he's gonna be bruised up after this season because of all his catches and getting hit a lot. But this is what we've wanted to see from Cam Johnson. I wanted to see a little bit more of it last year, but if we can involve him and get the offense's eyes on him, and then you got Pierce and Abdur-Rahman, this offense, I don't want to say this year can be as explosive as past offenses, but next season with this core, I think they got a chance to be a decent offense.
Yeah, with hopefully the offensive line not being kind of a ragtag put together group, and
Yeah.
getting those guys back. I mean, you add in three starting offensive linemen, and then
And
you
then
bring
you
in,
really got something.
yeah, the new recruits that you've got. Hopefully, Javion Marlowe. We don't know what these team rule violations are. We were really missing Javion Marlowe.
Yeah.
Rocco Griffin stepped in and did a good job carrying the ball, but he is a true freshman, and his pass protection, to be kind, is atrocious.
It's
I mean, he almost got Kinsel's killed. So
yeah.
that's something that we really have to see improvement on if he ever wants to see consistent playing time. Because Keon Henry Brooks, man, I can't harp on it enough. That was the first time that we had a playmaker on the field,
Yeah.
the entire season. And thinking back to that A&M game, if you had Keon Henry Brooks on the field, I think that's a 7-point swing for the
Mm-hmm.
offense, just because you have a guy that if he gets out in the open field, he's gone. And
Mm-hmm.
outside of him, we don't have that.
Yeah. And
The
he's just a gamer too, man. Like he's not super big, and he's not a blazer. You know, he's got good speed. He's able to
We
break
disagree
tackles.
on
But
that. I think he's might be the fastest running back we've had. Pure speed, straight line.
So straight line, I think you have an argument, but I think just pure breakaway, like breaking away from a guy. I think Keyshawn was really good at that. Like he sees a guy, okay, I'm going to beat you. And again, Keon Henry Brooks has a like you said, the ragtag O line, but
Yeah, I think the similarities between where you can draw with Vaughn is, for lack of a better term, these guys are slippery. It feels
mhm,
like that first guy just kind of slides off of him. And this is Henry Brooks still needing to probably put on around 10, 15 pounds
yeah,
to really be to where he wants to be.
mhm,
And another thing that you don't really talk about a lot, or you don't hear people like us talk about, is ball carrier vision, kind of an underrated aspect. When you go back, and I was watching I believe it was from the 2018 season with Vaughn, and then watching some web highlights, is they saw those cutback lanes and hit them,
mhm,
and that's how they would get a lot of those explosive runs. And Keon Henry Brooks is just right there. He just sees him a little bit late.
yeah.
And if he can improve that going into next season, you're going to make me yawn, Billy. But if he can improve that going into next season, that could be a guy that we could be talking about in a couple years, and talking about him with the likes of, and this is high praise, Zach Stacy, Ralph Webb,
Oh
Keyshawn Vaughn.
man.
So I've been talking about him since we did the season preview, that I've been really excited just with the flashes that we'd seen in previous years.
Yeah,
So
I think the new last name did a little bit to Keon Henry Brooks, and that's something I didn't even really catch on to until the first game. I saw him out there, and I think before the season we were calling him Keon Brooks, and then we get to that first game, it's like we see, oh, Keon Henry Brooks on the carry. I'm like, who is this? who is this guy? But he looks better. He looks a lot better than last year. Like you said, Will, he's gonna have he's gonna have to bulk up. But once he bulks up, and he's really good this year, but the ceiling is a little bit higher now for Keon Henry Brooks. Will, Vanderbilt plays Kentucky next Saturday. We're going to touch on it quickly here. But for Vanderbilt against Kentucky, I think the line is around 17 right now. And last week, what was it against Mississippi State? Was it 16, right around there?
for Vanderbilt, we were a 19-point underdog.
19. Okay, so 17. So in a little bit of a generous, line there from Vegas, but it's an early kick in Lexington. I think Vandy likes these road games for some reason. They played well in College Station. They played well at Mississippi State. We'll see if they can do it in Lexington. But well, Kentucky's a team that's struggling too. So how much better do you think Kentucky is in Mississippi State? And what kind of a game does Vanderbilt have to play, to have a chance in this one?
It's really unbelievable, if you haven't watched any Kentucky, how opposite of a team they are from Mississippi State, and in the same way, pretty similar. Uh, Mississippi State doesn't run the ball almost at all. I mean, even their runs or passes, like little forward
Yeah.
pitches. Kentucky can't throw the ball to save their life. I mean, they'll maybe throw it 8, 10 times a game, and it is almost a majority run. They're just going to hammer it down your throat. So we'll know very, very early if Vanderbilt is going to be able to slow down that running game. Because in the past, one of the Achilles heels of the Derek Mason defense in general, even the years when it was really good, were running quarterbacks and athletic quarterbacks and not being able to contain that read option. We do have a really talented, I think the defensive line inarguably is probably the strength of that defense, and Dio Dangbo, Andre Mintz, Davion
Yeah.
Davis, and then guys rotating in on that defensive line. And then backers like Dimitri Moore, Orji, and our guys came up like Jalen Mahoney and Brendan Harris, who are making some really good plays in the back.
Harris had a really good game.
So I think this matchup, theoretically, I don't want to say upset, because I haven't predicted, and I won't predict right yet, but I haven't predicted Vanderbilt to win a game this year yet. But if I was going to predict one, I've got a little bit of a good
Uh-oh.
feeling about this upcoming
Oh
week, because
my.
this Kentucky isn't going to be the one that drives down the field and scores in 3 plays. So
Yeah.
it plays into the hands of kind of a slower pace, gritty, dirty game, which I think always is going to favor a team like Vanderbilt that may have the lower talent level.
Yeah, early kick in Lexington, a road game, and for some reason Vandy's been playing very well in road games. And I agree with you somewhat, Will. I think Kentucky's going to have to kind of gift wrap Vandy some presents if Vandy wants to win this game. But again, Ken Seals also has to limit the turnovers. And if Vandy can win the turnover battle, we could see some magic in Lexington. And we tweeted from our account, we saw a little bit of magic in Starkville. So we'll see how just how eager Vandy is to get back onto the field. And we shall see. That'll be a noon Eastern time kick in Lexington.
And one thing I want to say about the Kentucky game, which why it just feels like you ever get the feeling of just the perfect storm kind of coming together is, they're coming off a bye week. And then next week, and it's 11 a.m. kickoff during this weird season. 11 a.m. kickoffs are always weird. And then next week, they have #1 Alabama to look forward to. So maybe some eyes peeking ahead.
This could be a classic Vandy trap game we could see.
And you say that, and I'm sure that the coaches are sitting there preaching, we can't, come out unfocused. It's easy to say that. It's really hard when, those Kentucky players are looking and thinking, all right, this week we've got Vanderbilt, then we've got Alabama, and that's where their eyes are going to be maybe peeking just a little bit.
We'll see. We shall see. Yeah, I like where you're thinking. Well, we will talk a whole lot more about Kentucky Vandy coming up in our Friday episode. The preview, we'll have a Kentucky guest, and we'll talk all things Vandy, Kentucky. So we got a little bit of basketball in, Will. Again, Legends Classic coming up December 1st. Can't wait for that. Issac McBride is eligible. So, again, congrats to him. Happy birthday, Scottie Pippen Jr. And Vanderbilt, Kentucky coming up after a tough loss at Mississippi State. We'll see if Vandy can play well on the road once again. For myself, Billy, Derrick, and Will Byrum, you've been listening to episode 46 of The Door Report presented by Alaco Hardwood Flooring.